The influencers that you are watching online have eating disorders, and the algorithm knows it. Hello. Welcome to this little bite episode of the Uncovery podcast. I was just on social media and this is what inspired me to talk about this. So I want to talk about algorithms and how the content that you are consuming may or may not be getting in the way of your recovery. And I'm not just talking about diety, fitness influencer, like truly unhelpful kind of problematic content. That in recovery, like we don't need to be doing at all regardless. But I'm talking about recovery content actually. And I think that we as content create, well, am I a content creator? That doesn't like resonate, but let's just say we as content creators are putting out a very particular perspective in a lot of ways, right? Different content creators, different therapists, dietitians, people who have been through recovery, people who are recovering, who are documenting their process online. There are good, helpful accounts, and there are not good, not helpful accounts. That's the nicest way that I can put that. And I think there's a spectrum of high quality, very helpful recovery content, all the way to like pro eating disorder type of content, like thinspo, that kind of stuff. There's a really big area of gray in between those two poles of this spectrum. And I like to think that I'm very close to the one end. What I notice in my own feed and what I've noticed over years and years of having social media and watching my algorithm change over time, depending on what was happening with me. And what that has shown me is just how powerful and attuned the algorithms are to our behavior, and then how good they are at feeding more of that to us. And B, how impactful that is reciprocally on our well-being and on our own recovery and our own journeys and psyches, etc. So there's something to be said for consuming pro-recovery content. And what I would say is kind of in the middle of that spectrum is people that are going through recovery and documenting their process. There's also a wide range of the types of different accounts that do that, even in that one sort of subset of creators. But people that are going through their own recovery, they do not always have the wherewithal, the mindfulness, or indeed like the cognitive capacity because of their eating disorder and perhaps malnutrition to be conscious of the impact that they could be having on other people that are going through recovery who are indeed their intended audience. So when we are watching somebody's journey in real time, we have to be aware of the fact that they are in their own lane. They are doing their own thing. That's going to be different than what we're doing. So that's one thing, is like really, really being conscious of not my circus, not my monkeys. This is not my person to emulate. They are doing their own thing. So that's one thing, is that if they are in recovery, they will be having a different journey than you are in your own. They are going to be living in a different body than you are living in. And so there is nothing to emulate there. They are going to have different nutritional needs. They are going to have different activity levels. They have a very different life. And they have a different sort of experience in their history of why it is where they're at, etc. They have a different set of help, a different set of resources. There is nothing about someone else's journey that you need to copy paste. Even if you can take inspiration from the bravery of their sharing or certain things that they say or go through that resonate with you that you feel like you're going through as well, that kind of thing can be helpful. But I have this real, hesitancy. There's a tension I feel with it of explicitly sharing like day-to-day life of a recovery journey with an audience. For the reasons I just stated, which is that everybody's having their own real different thing. And the pull we have to compare ourselves is already very strong in people with eating disorders. And I think it makes it stronger to sort of like put in the faces of people that are in recovery, oh, here's exactly what I do in a day, or here's what I eat in a day, or here's a picture of my food, or here's a food challenge that I did. The act of doing a food challenge for somebody, maybe that is inspiring and it makes them feel like they can do it. But really, a lot of the time, if we're in our eating disorder and even if we're in recovery, we are seeking out the type of content as a sort of salve for our brain to be like, am I eating less than that? Am I eating more than that? And what does that mean about me in comparison to that person? That happens all the time. And if someone tells you it isn't, they are lying. So my issue is with this like constant bombardment of like, here's every single thought, feeling, food, and movement thing that I am going through at the moment. The tension I feel with having that perspective is that I have so openly shared my own journey. Now, I think mine has been a bit different in that I have chosen topics, spoken about them, given information, and the extent to which I share what am I struggling with, I try to keep it general. I try to keep it experiential rather than detailed and granular and day to day to day. That was always my intention, and I continue to sort of hold that ethos in place. It is also why I did not have video for the podcast for the first 2 seasons, 2 years. Because I was like, nobody needs to see that. Like, nobody needs to see an unhealthy, underweight person touting about recovery. Even though I believed in recovery and I wasn't being disingenuous, still just in the process of like gaining my weight back and like getting healthy. So it didn't mean that I didn't do the things I was saying I was doing, but it meant that like my body hadn't caught up with my theory, basically, right? Like my mindset, my purpose, my intention, my body had not caught up yet. And I just didn't feel that that was like an appropriate way to express myself through this medium, through this video medium. It wasn't something that I was comfortable doing. This is not to say that people that are in recovery creating content that are still on their journey of like restoration are bad or wrong, but I do think that we need to be realistic about how helpful that actually is to people and how far along that kind of content can really get you in your own recovery. There is also a risk that if you stay steeped in the eating disorder content world, the algorithm will continue to feed that to you. No pun intended. No pun intended. The algorithm will continue to give you more of what you are already hovering on, clicking on, liking, following, etc. It'll keep giving that to you. So what that means is that even as you move through your recovery journey, you will be sort of just like part of this world and community for probably longer than you want to be. And I don't know that that's necessarily healthy. So moving away from obsessively following recovery accounts is, I think, a really important step in a recovery journey to be like, I don't need to be in this all the time anymore. I can move past this. I can start consuming content about other things that interest me because you have a whole bunch of interests as a human being. And part of this recovery process is uncovering what those parts of you are, the ones that you want to be feeding, for lack of a better word, the ones that you want to be paying attention to, giving your time to, giving your energy to. And the more you stay kind of stuck in the like, here's like this food challenge that I did today, and like, oh, I did that. I just think it can keep you stuck in a way. I just think we need to be mindful of it. I just really think that we need to pay attention to it. Conscious curation of content means basically tricking your algorithm into giving you things that are better for you. And so that sometimes means abstaining from participating in social media for a while until the algorithm kind of like reset. Like I remember it took me ages to get my algorithm to be what it is now, which is like, it's so weird. Like I have to train my Instagram feed to give me puppies instead of bodybuilding diet foods. Like that took years. And I'm so happy now because my feed is like mostly puppies and, you know, inspirational quotes. And there's a lot of Taylor Swift. Instagram seems to think that I'm a Swiftie. I'm not really sure where this happened, but like nothing that I know about like Taylor Swift and her journey has been something that I have been seeking out. It has all been like basically against my will, everything I know about this. But that's fine. That's fine. If something's going to be bombarding my Instagram feed, as long as it's not like diet stuff, that's fine. And I'm in a place of recovery where it's not like it would trigger me or trip me up. But I just think that creating space between you and these things is only going to help your recovery process. That said, there are helpful recovery accounts that are by, either like by dietitians or by psychologists who know what they're doing. But that's also really hard to tell, like, what's the good stuff and what's the potentially unhelpful stuff. It's important to know whether or not you align, whether you resonate with people that are creating this kind of content, whether or not they have a sound clinical background that they should even be giving you advice, right? Like, being able to discern between what qualifies a person to be speaking about a topic and not. And that includes me and this podcast, right? Like, you have to take what I say within the context of what you know my expertise and my life to be, and whether or not you find that compelling, trustworthy, etc. I think it's important to interrogate the sources of that information, but that's difficult when you are malnourished and tired all the time too. So that's another reason why I think this kind of world is all a little bit risky when we're looking to online content to support, inspire, provide guidance to us. That said, I'm going to tell you some of the main red flags that I see when it comes to online content, recovery focus, that type of thing. If someone is posting before and afters of their body, red flag, absolute no-go. Absolute no-go. I've even seen some accounts where I really respect and I actually think that their learnings are valuable, but the fact that they are using a before and after of their like sick self and health self, which ironically and somewhat coincidentally always looks like sort of a gym fitness type of outcome in their body. Absolute red flag. That's a no from me. That's a no from me. It's disingenuous to the principles of recovery from an eating disorder, and it's unhelpful. And even though I don't believe necessarily in like trigger warnings and not being able to like discern for yourself what's triggering content and to work yourself through it if you are triggered, it's literally unhelpful, and I think it's disordered because it's a form of body checking, and I think what it tells us is that that person is actually not as well as they think that they are. That's my opinion. That's just how I feel about it. So that's an immediate no from me. I've talked about this before in episodes, but people that are doing what I eat in a days, also huge red flag. Giving inspiration about recipes or like things that are, I don't know how, if you're like a food account, you're like a food creator, you're a chef and you have an Instagram account, of course, fine, like post food. If you're doing I wake up in the morning and I have a green juice, if you're starting with that, I'm like, goodbye, not like nothing to see here. You just don't need to be doing this, and you don't need to be following it if you are in recovery. Now, if you are just like a lifestyle influencer, and this is where stuff gets really complicated, is that if you're not purporting to be a recovery account, and you are doing these kind of like what I eat in a day things, then like it could be argued that because it isn't a recovery account, that then this person isn't being irresponsible by showing everything that they eat in a day. However, many, many, many people who are online and are lifestyle influencers so very clearly have a disordered relationship with food in their body, so very clearly have disordered eating patterns and exercise patterns, and so very clearly are also only showing you one facet, one layer of what their life actually looks like. So those are the problems with like following lifestyle influencers. I don't know that we need to be as inspired as we think we do by the way that other people live. People that have a ton of money, like perhaps have a ton of debt and like purport to have a type of life that is unattainable and is also not really desirable. I think that it just like opens up a whole other conversation about like, why are we attracted to this in the first place? Why are we attracted to these idyllic lives that we see presented to us online, which almost 100% of the time have a very idyllic body type, some kind of beauty standard that we aspire to, which, by the way, are almost always modified and filtered. So we need to take that into account, and are not average by any means. The reason that people are famous online and offline is partially because of the way their body naturally is. Does that make sense? So like they're not a representation of an average person or even attainable standard of beauty or body or whatever it is. That doesn't actually exist in 99.9% of the population. Further, those people that we are emulating, wanting to be like, looking to, admiring, so many of them have eating disorders. I believe I've said this on the podcast before, but one of the most profound things that my first therapist ever told me is that when I was sort of resisting the fact that like what I was doing was a problem, or the fact that like caring about food and body and whatever was a problem. And I was like, well, all these people like on fitness magazines or who do bodybuilding competitions, this is like, before I knew anything. They do this and it's fine for them. Like, it's fine for them. Why can't I, sort of a thing? And she said to me, those people come into my office and they sit on the couch where you're sitting right now. Those people that you think are just like super healthy and ambitious and like do all of this stuff, they have eating disorders. So we need to like get our heads out of our phones and out of our screens a little bit and like give our head a shake and be like, what does an actual normal life and person look like? And what do they act like? And how can we emulate that behavior instead of this filtered, false sense of what the world is? It's a huge risk to society to continue to be like scrolling reel after reel after reel after reel after reel and being like, oh, that's how a relationship should be. That's how a body should be. As if that's really what those people's lives are like, and as if that's really what we should be aspiring to do. There's a way to be inspired, but to also be mindful. But you have to be so conscious of what you're following and who. A good way to do this, a good way to kind of experiment with this, is to be like, do I feel in the pit of my stomach like a little bit of I'm not enough when I'm following these things? When I step away from my phone, do I come away being like, oh, man, I wish I had that? Or do I find myself buying products that I see influencers using? If you're finding yourself purchasing things online as a result of people talking about them, that is a red flag to me in terms of like, okay, well, there's clearly something here that you're wanting to emulate, that you think you're going to get the skin that they have by picking up that product. And again, it's not all of it. There are like real dermatologists online that like have good advice for skincare. Usually it's like wash your face, moisturize, use sunscreen, and like drink your water. That's usually what the actual good clinical advice is. It's not like buy this product that I'm sponsored by, right? But you have to be able to tell the difference. So watch your purchasing patterns, see how that aligns. Watch your mood patterns, see how that aligns with the content that you're creating. And those should be sort of your starting points of being like, oh, maybe I should look a little bit deeper at this and maybe I should take a step back. I've done times where I've taken huge, giant social media breaks. And to be completely fair, I'm always conflicted because I know that the only way to promote content that I make that I think is actually helpful, hopefully, is to engage with social media and to put stuff out. But I kind of wish that that wasn't the game, because I think that honestly, I would be mentally better if I didn't look at it ever. And it just wasn't on my phone. It wasn't in the ether and it wasn't in my psyche. So those are my thoughts on sort of influence versus de-influence, and even in the eating disorder recovery community type of content, I think you've got to be really careful who you follow, how much you follow it. And especially as you move through the recovery process, it should not be compelling to you anymore to be looking at what recovery people and recovery accounts are doing. It shouldn't be compelling even to look at like what dietitians and therapists are saying about eating disorders anymore. As you're actually moving through and out of your eating disorder, you do not need that stuff anymore. You don't need it. All it will do is kind of like keep you stuck. So that's my opinion. That's what I've been thinking about. And we'll see you on the next episode.